Welcome to another video from Dr. Lock. In this video I thought we'd go through and talk about making a digital key copy of your key. Now car keys are not the same old car keys we used to have. I've got a few variations here. So you've got your old metal key. These are still used on trucks and some four-wheel drives and things, but generally speaking this is an older type of key. Then we move into the new, more modern keys. These keys look all the same. The only difference is they actually contain a transponder in the head of the key, so that's actually in there. Then we move up to the next stage and we've got like a remote key. So now we've got the blade, the transponder and the remote control in the key. So to have all three in the key makes it more difficult to do a digital copy or a backup type of plan of key. This video is purely to just give some people a bit of an idea on what's involved when you do lose your key, or ways that you can actually have a backup plan for your key if you're in a remote area, because these things are very inconvenient if you've got to get somebody to travel 400 to 500 k's or even 1,000 k's to get to you to get your vehicle moving because you've lost your key somewhere along the lines. So this will give you some sort of idea and way of helping you. Let's start with the first key, first cab off the rank, this one here, plain standard metal key. Now when you get a car, a lot of the time it comes with a little metal tag attached here. That would be your key code. That key code any locksmith can put into the computer and reproduce this key here using these grooves back to manufacturer's specs. So it might have a code something like 4621 on a little metal key tag attached to it. So once you do get that little piece of metal, it's good to store it in your phone, put it on the cloud, put it somewhere you can access it. By having your manufacturer, make and model and year, if you give that information to any locksmith, they can produce this key exactly back to the code it is. There are other methods too, some of which are not as desirable. Well, first of all, this code can also be found in your logbooks sometimes. It can also be found on the driver's side door lock as well. So let's see that code there. That's what it'll look like, and you find that on the driver's side door lock. You can also find it stamped on the key as well. Sometimes it appears about here. So there's 4 different ways of actually finding that particular key code. The like 5th way would be to get a pair of vernier calipers like this and actually go through and measure all the grooves on it. You can do that if you wish, like that one there, 473. So we would go number 1, 473. We would go all the way through the cuts, 683. Close enough. Anyway, you go all the way through to 8, okay, or however many it's got, 6, 7, 8, doesn't matter. So that right there would give you, if you have the make, a model and the year, and you took in all those direct sizes to a locksmith, they could reproduce it once again. If you have the key code, they could reproduce it once again. If you want to do the camera method, now the camera method is yet another way of doing it, and I'll just quickly show you how that works now. Where are we here? Where's my camera? So you would put the key over the top on a white background and you would take a photo. Now that can be done, but the problem is that it's a little bit hit and miss. Sometimes you get a good photo, sometimes it's not so clear. Sometimes you have to recut that key a few times until you can actually get that exact key. You know, so resizing it, printing it out, it can be quite a challenge and take up a lot of time. The easiest way, I mean, photo is a good backup if you've got nothing, but the easiest way is to find that code. If not, measure that and write it all down, store it on your phone somewhere, because if you're out in the bush or out in the jungle, wherever you might be, and you lose your key, if you've got that information, somebody can actually remotely cut that key to the right specs and send it to you. So that's one way of digitally, well, there's a couple of ways there, right there, of digitally recording that particular metal key. So let's pop that one aside. The next one here we're going to look at is the same thing, but it's with a transponder. So first thing we do is we try and find the key code. Can we find it from the tag? No. Can we find it written on the key? No. Can we find it from the driver's side door lock? No. In which case we can simply record the cuts and write down the make and model as well. And we can even take a photo because it really doesn't hurt. That will allow us to once again produce the blade, but won't allow us to generate the chip which is stored in the key. If you do have a working copy of the key, you can take it to a locksmith and ask him to decode your key and see what type of chip is in it. Once you know what type of chip, they come in basically different formats. Sometimes you can actually get the information from that chip and it can be written back onto another chip. It is a lot harder, and not all cars are the same, and not all types of chips can do that. So the easiest way, if you do have a transponder chip and you're looking for a way to digitally record your key, my best advice would be is to get another chip cloned. So as far as if you're in a remote location, you might, as a backup plan, if you had this little tiny black chip, I don't know where you're going to store it, maybe in the first aid compartment, maybe in your tool section underneath the boot or somewhere along those lines. This little tiny chip, if you leave it inside the car, if you're ever in a bad situation where you can't drive your car or if you've lost your key, this little chip right here defeats the whole immobilizer system. So people are not pulling apart your car people are not pulling off dashes, they're not doing all sorts of things. You've got that chip, then you're only down to the problem of the keyblade. The problem of the keyblade is half the problem, and it's a lot easier sorted out by Locksmith than it is for a chip. For example, there was one person I heard of, he drives up to 600 kilometers to program in a car, and he charges a lot of money for it. If you had the chip and it was only a matter of cutting the key, any locksmith can do it. Even some key cutters and things like that, they can even do it as well. They might have the machinery these days as well. So you're in a much better position if you don't have to generate, if you don't have the problems of a transponder chip in a remote location. So having a digital backup of your key is one thing, but the immobilizer, you can have a slight digital copy on some makes and models, but it's much easier when you've got a working key just to get a spare one, or even put it together as a spare key in the car. But by having that chip, it's going to save you a lot of trouble. If you don't have that chip, in certain cars and certain scenarios, worst case scenario, you've got to pull out a dashboard or an ECU and start playing around with the chip, or pull out the dash to get to the box so that you can get to the chip. Things like this can be extremely expensive. So as far as recording a digital copy, the blade, not so much of a problem. We went over that in number 1. The chip can be a problem, but there is that slight chance that you can get a digital record of it. For example, this chip, what is it? This is a 4C. So this would be a 4C, and then there might be a code, and that might possibly be able to be put back into a chip if the locksmith has the right equipment, and if that is one of the chips that can be done with. So you're not going to be able to do a digital copy of the chip, not 100% anyway, and not 100% guaranteed. So that's why we go with a backup chip. And if you had this inside your car here, let's say, for example, you lost your key completely, then you'd only be left with the actual mechanical key. If a burglar was to find this, it'd be very hard to find it, especially when you've hidden it under the carpet or somewhere, or in a headrest, somewhere that then you'll be fine. If you wish to actually do a metal key and the transponder and separate them, you can do this, and then you can actually store them inside your car. This being like a backup plan. If you had this inside a headrest, and only you know which headrest it's in, and you had this, let's say, under the passenger footwell, you need to put these two together in the ignition to get the car to start. So if a burglar was to find this one or this one, without the two of them, they're not going to be able to drive your car away. So if you're walking through the bush or you're out on the field and you've lost your key completely, your biggest problem now would be just getting back into the car, and at which stage you've got a backup like this that you could use. As far as running a digital backup, yes you can, but then you're still reliant on a locksmith to come out there. But if you've lost your key completely and you're in normal suburbia, then having a digital backup can certainly save you a lot of time and money. Okay, remote keys, here's one that we found on the street. So this incorporates all three of these. Now we've got the keyblade, we've got the transponder, and we've also got a remote control. So with the remote control, it's not really possible to record a digital backup of that remote control. Best case scenario is that you could get the transponder sorted out in the keyblade, but you're not going to be able to get that remote control programmed into your car. You need to get another remote control, you need to know which frequency it is, and then you can cut the blade, get the transponder programmed in, and then get the remote control also programmed in. So this is like 3 steps now rather than 2. So if this is what you've got, don't worry too much, because you can get around that just by using a normal key with a transponder. That's what they're designed for. Even with the proximities as well, you might see that it's got no key blade on it at all. You'll probably find it's got an emergency blade up the side or on the back of it, and you can bring it down to a simple level of just an emergency key transponder and a key blade. So if you do have a remote key and you are looking for a way to digitally record it, yes, you can take a photo of the blade. Yes, you can record the actual blade section of it. You can also go through with the transponder, either make a clone or record the data from that as well. But if you're in a remote location and you've got a key like this, my best advice would be to get a key like this made, get it programmed into the car, and you've got to back up and store it in the car. There's a few ways you can store keys in cars. Under the car, in tow bars, safe boxes, window safe boxes, all those type of things. If you're more worried about theft and you're worried about somebody coming into your car and actually finding that, then you can move to the other old school technology of you need the key blade and you need the transponder. You separate these two around your car, nobody's going to be able to find it, and that will actually get you through and be able to drive the car instead of using a remote key like this. If you're in a remote location, it doesn't matter how many photos and things you've got, you're not going to be able to keep a digital record of your transponder chip, and you're not going to be able to keep a digital record of your remote control or the frequency or the rolling code that it's producing and get that reproduced in a time of need. So there's a couple of little backups right there. My best advice would be to anyone who's got one key is definitely get another key made. If you're in a remote location, it is handy to have the information from the key and the key code, keep it on file, because if you haven't gone to the stage of creating a backup, if you've at least got something, it's better than nothing, and it's going to save you money. Like, for example, in some Toyotas where you've got to pull the dash out, if somebody told me that they had basically the transponder, which was already programmed, and nothing else, to reproduce this key would only be, let's say, $200. Go out there, and the remote control, copying the remote control, anywhere from $100 up to $400 or $500. So that's not a viable option to have that. It's more, it's easier to use, it's more convenient, but it's not really going to be a viable option as a backup. Getting a key cut from the image, that right there, you'd probably be looking $50 to $100 because they might have to cut it multiple times. Getting a key cut from the code, just for a metal keyblade here, you're probably talking about the $50 mark. All these prices vary depending on the locksmith and the machine that they use and those type of factors and where they're located and how much rent they pay. But on a general scale, these are just general prices to give you some sort of idea of the difference between having each and every one. Getting a key cloned like this, that varies depending on car to car. Can start from anywhere from $70 up to about $150 on an average. So, you know, if you can, you just get a complete backup. The other option of storing your transponder information and then giving it to a locksmith, this is not really a done thing, and if you were to do that, it could be a little bit hit and miss, and I would be expecting you would be paying a premium for doing that. So make a digital record of that, perhaps not as good as just doing a straight out clone and keeping one with you or keeping one with the car. All these ideas and solutions are basically based on people who cannot afford to fail with their keys, especially when they're in a remote location. A lot of people around Australia, deserts, bush, country, you know, it can be a long distance between locksmiths, so that's why it's just a little bit of an idea on what you can do. If you've got any comments or other ways to back things up, leave it down in the description. When I make keys for a car, I always like to give the customer the code number, and you know, that's half the equation some of the time, and that code number, once we find it, we can put it into a computer and it can tell us the actual indirect code. That's an indirect code where it's a number which doesn't refer to the bitting, and this one up here that we spoke about where we actually measure the sizes, that's more of a direct code, and if we know what size matches what depth, then that's fine. Other people, a lot of locksmiths out there can just simply look at a key and say 42442 and read it as quickly as that. All these things can be done if you wish, but it's better to have measurements, at least then the locksmith can compare it and say, oh, for 4.37, yeah, that's a number 2, 6.85, yeah, that's a number 4. So at least that way it's a little bit more accurate. The code is a lot more accurate too than a photo, and I hope I've demonstrated that point. Any comments or anything else, please leave it down below, and thanks for watching.